Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela. I have Tank and Willie the Corgi here with me today, and I'm going to open this episode with a quote. And full disclosure, I might say the name wrong. I absolutely love and adore Lord of the Rings, and what I really find interesting about movies and books is how our love or care for them can be reawakened. I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time in 2022 or 2023, and it was kind of interesting because I it's a joke, but I'll fill you in on the joke. I almost got kicked out of film school for my lack of movie watching. And I didn't literally almost get kicked out, but a couple of my teachers joked with me and said, you really should not come to school, go watch the movies and come back to school. And what's interesting is it didn't even cross my mind that if you go to film school, you should be a movie watcher. I don't know why that didn't dawn on me because I just 60% of the reason I chose film school, there are other reasons, was because I wanted to learn how to write a movie. But one of my big dreams has always been to write a book that becomes a movie. And one of the things that, even from a young age, that would drive me nuts is how much the book to the movie would change. And now, since going to film school, I actually do really understand why so much of it has to change. However, even with that understanding, I always wanted to have more control, have more of a say in how said book would get turned into a movie. I never wanted to turn my art over to somebody else to make it something other than what it was. And I know even J.K. Rowling for the first few movies was pretty hands-on. And then as she trusted, I think it's Steve Knowles, she was less hands-on throughout it. But I always wanted to be able to have enough of a knowledge that I could either help convert my book to a screenplay or know enough that if someone was converting it to a screenplay and they said, well, there is no other option, I would know enough to say, that's not true. We can do it this way. And so that was one of the reasons I went to school. It didn't really dawn on me that I should also watch movies. However, I have a couple of really good friends that post film school have really, and the one thing that I love, and you've met, if you've listened to this show for a while, you've met one of those friends, which is Landon. Landon actually comes on the show every now and again and does movie reviews with me. And Landon and his wife, Christina, have really helped me get caught up on movies. But what I really love about Landon and Christina is if they know I won't like a movie, even if it is quote unquote one of the best movies of all time, they'll tell me not to watch it because they just know I won't enjoy it. And for them, yes, they're movie nerds, but they also can see the person really well and say, okay, we can see how objectively this is a good movie and how also you just wouldn't like it because it's not your thing. Well, they knew I would love Lord of the Rings. But one of the things I've had to deconstruct is, and all of us have this, but we all have what I call a trauma trance. And that is the persona that we had to create in our childhood to stay safe. Now, there's nothing wrong with the trauma trance. Objectively, we all did what we could to do the best in our childhood, as well with our parents. However, the roadblock, the hurdle, let's say, with the trauma trance is that we start to confuse it with who we really are at our core. And until we start to peel the layers of this trauma trance back, we will confuse our trauma selves with our authentic selves. And those are not the same personalities. Those are not the same personas. And so we have to continue to peel this onion, these layers back to find our authentic selves. We have to take the trauma off so that our soul selves, our authentic selves is revealed. And it's interesting because in watching these movies, it has helped me peel back those layers. It has helped me reveal more of my authentic self because what I've caught is I will say I won't be interested in a movie. I will say I won't like a movie. And it's actually not me. It's actually, those are movies my parents wouldn't have liked. And so even if we wanted to watch a movie as a family, it would have to be something my sister, myself, and my parents would like. And yes, I believe that that is okay when we're watching a family movie. However, because when we're kids and we just, if you grew up, I was born in 95, and if you grew up going to movie rental houses, and you were only allowed to, rent one or two movies, you would pick the movie that everyone would like and not necessarily that I would like. And so I really avoided and ignored watching Lord of the Rings. And part of it was the time commitment. I really didn't, if I'm going to watch it, I'm going to pick a day where I can, especially if you watch the extended versions, it's every bit of a 12-hour journey. And so there is that. There was a bit of a time commitment for me. And because I either want to try and watch them all in one day or within, days of each other. And so finally got the time to watch them. We had a really, really hot summer day where I had the days off, and then you couldn't really do anything outside, because if I can be outside, I'm going to be outside. But it was so hot that the dogs and I would feed horses first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and during the day you were in the house in the AC. And so finally had the time and realized I had avoided watching these movies for so long because there was still a part of me that was like, well, I'm not going to like it, but I do like it. My mom and dad don't like these movies. They wouldn't like these movies. And so that was kind of in my head. It's like, well, I don't like orcs, or even when I watch Star Wars, my mom hates aliens and like space stuff, which to me is not what Star Wars is at all. And even with the orcs and some of the mythical stuff in Lord of the Rings, to me, it's not a mythical story at all. That's just the way the story comes through. We don't consider ourselves a car, but yet we drive cars. And that's kind of how I look at movies. It's like, what's the story? And then what is the way the story is coming through? Because it's just the way the story is coming through. To me, obviously most movies, yeah, not all movies, it's some kind of hero's journey. And I say that because we'll talk more about this later, but Christopher Robin, the live action remake of Winnie the Pooh, is very much the heroine's journey and less of the hero's journey. So most movies are going to be the hero's journey. And it's like, what is that hero's journey? Because to me, that is that is the driver, is what is the story? What is this journey? And then whether it's fantasy or space or whatever, that's the vehicle at which the story is coming through. And so I finally sit down and I watch Lord of the Rings, and then back in 2022, 2023. And then recently and I've talked about this in other episodes, but I do want to state it again here. Whenever our soul or our intuition is wanting us to learn a specific concept or grasp a certain lesson or go through a certain journey, we will get if we're listening, we'll get the intuitive hits to watch certain movies because the character or the movie has the lesson or the experience that we need to learn or we need to understand or we need to grasp. And so a couple weeks ago, I'm like, man, I haven't watched Lord of the Rings in a long time. And it is like my love for it. It feels brand new again, which is really interesting. And I don't know if it's because I've watched them enough times now. I'm starting to grasp some, because there's the main story, but then there's all these sub stories. There's the main lesson, and then there's all these sub lessons. And I've watched this movie and been in this world long enough. I'm starting to catch more of the sub lessons and the sub stories. And one of the things that caught my attention, and this is the quote that I wanted to share, and how we went into that whole deep dive, is because I love Lord of the Rings. Some of the names, like, I think I really just got the difference between Sauron and Saruman. There's Aragorn and there's Elrond and Eowyn, and all those names, and especially because they are more mythical, they kind of all just smush together in my brain, and they don't always come out the way that I want them to come out. And so all of that to say, I might pronounce this wrong, and I'm well aware that I might pronounce this wrong. But when I pronounce things wrong, I get a little bit insecure about it. And so I needed to tell you all of that to say that I'm going to share a quote, and I'm probably going to pronounce her name wrong. And I'm going to ask you to give me grace, because I'm probably not really giving myself grace because honestly, I'm a Virgo and the small details matter to me. including this one that I'm probably about to mess up a little bit, but that's okay. We're human and we're here to learn. So it's the quote, and of course I'm going to blank. It's either in Two Towers or in Return of the King. Kind of want to say it was in Return of the King. And it was when, yeah, I think it is in Return of the King when Gollum has just betrayed Frodo, and because he's trying to get the ring back. He let him into where that, I guess, spoiler alert if you haven't watched Lord of the Rings, but I'm not going to give the whole thing away, but there's a little bit of spoiler alert here. Gollum leads Frodo into this cave, where instead of Gollum like directly overpowering Frodo, he's going to have this spider do it so he can take the ring. Oh my gosh, and it's going to drive me nuts. So I'm going to look it up in real time because again, no, it is, of course, I've got it up on ChatGPT, and it's saying it's in the movie. It's not, so it must be in the extended version. But of course, ChatGPT didn't. Anyway, I think it's in the extended version. Maybe that's why. It's not popping up. And of course, my brain is like, you have to know this now. No, I think it keeps saying it's in Fellowship of the Ring, but it's not because it's deeper into the story. I'm almost positive it's in Return of the King. Come on, chat. Like, this is the thing that I get a little bit concerned with ChatGPT, because I think there's so many of us that are, we, because of course when I tell ChatGPT, oh, I think it's in, okay. Of course, when I tell ChatGPT, I'm pretty sure it's in the extended version of Return of the King. First, it's like, no, it's absolutely not. And then it is. This is my concern with ChatGPT, because I catch chat being wrong all the time. Like, I think chats, and I think it's going to get more advanced, but, I think so many of us are putting things into ChatGPT and it's inaccurate and we don't have a way to like prove it. But we'll get off on that tangent on another day. So, okay. Now that we have that accuracy, it is in Return of the King in the extended version, and it's the elf that says it is the blonde one, that does like the opening narration, and I want to say it Galadriel, but anyway, so I'll let you make fun of my butchering. And she says to Frodo, so he just gets like attacked by the spider and he's all alone and he's going kind of in this trance, like what I would call an hallucination. And she comes to him in this trance and says to Frodo, this task was appointed to you, Frodo of the Shire. If you do not find a way, no one will. And the reason that I wanted to share this quote with you today and I wanted to talk about this is because we all have a task. We all have a mission that we are here to solve and that nobody else will. There is something in every single one of our lives that if we don't find the way, no one else will. And it can be literally anything. It could be how you make a mac and cheese recipe. It could be how you take a concept and in the way that you deliver it. A lot of us will get caught on, the story's already been told. It's not the story itself. Obviously the hero's journey has been told in hundreds and thousands of different ways. I mean, look how many movies there are, even thinking about, I like the visual of a movie house better. And it's interesting. I'm recording this in a small town in Central Oregon, and in Bend, Oregon, which is about an hour from where I'm at, is where the last Blockbuster is. It's the only Blockbuster left in the world. And so I like the visual of that better because, you think even when you walk into a movie house, just that alone, how many hundreds of movies there are. And it's all a basis or spinoff of the hero or the heroine's journey or some kind of story. And yet we're still going to see movies. We still, and, even thinking I like the like I said, I like the visual concept of actually walking into like a movie rental house better. But, even thinking about all these movies that are on streaming, hundreds and thousands of movies, not including now people that are making shorts and they're putting on YouTube. And yet we still go watch movies with quote unquote the same story being told. But it's the delivery, it's the message that matters. And so even for you, you maybe have an idea that you've been sitting on, and the reason you're not taking action on it is because the story you're telling yourself is the story's already been told. But here's the thing, we all have soul contracts, we all have soul commitments with specific people, and those people are only here to learn from us. And so if you don't tell this story in the way that you are meant to tell it, in the way that you are to deliver it, the person that you are here to help is possibly never going to learn that concept. I do think they'll go find another way, but the message and the way we deliver the message is just important as the message itself. And, one of my favorite like ideas of this is my mom, since I don't remember my mom ever not saying this, was telling me to make my bed. And basically as an act of rebellion, because I got sick of her like just hearing about it, because kind of there's a spiritual law called the law of opposing forces. And so essentially, if someone, we can take this into dating, right? Have you ever had someone that you didn't like, you liked them, but you didn't want to be with them, and they're just chasing your tail? And then the moment you want to be with them, they stop chasing your tail. Well, that's the law of opposing forces. So you wanted them 0, so they wanted you 100. But the moment you wanted them 80 to 100, now they can only want you 0 to 20. And so the goal is to stay right there in the middle. And so I think that's what was going on. My mom wanted me to make the bed so badly that I was like, absolutely not. No, I'm not making my bed. This is stupid. And so I never did. And then I got into personal development, and there's a guy, I want to say his name's William. I can't remember, but he literally has a book called Make Your Bed, and he was an admiral or something, and he was pretty high up in the service. And his biggest speech was on making your bed, and he gave all this data about how, and I can't remember all the data offhand, but I'm just going to tell you what I do remember of, like, it gives you a sense of accomplishment first thing out of the day. And because you have that sense of accomplishment, now it creates momentum to want to accomplish more in your day. But then it also gives you a sense of being put together first thing in the day. When you walk into your room, whether if you work from home at lunch, like you remember like, oh, I did that thing first thing this morning. And then seeing that thing put together gives you more confidence. So he lays out this whole thing, and I started making my bed. And my mom looked at me and she was like, and because let's see, this was like 2016, 2017. My mom looks at me and she was like, I've been telling you to make your bed your whole entire life, and now you start making your bed. It was the same message, but it was a different delivery style. I did not listen to my mom, but I listened to this William guy because of how he delivered it, because how I felt, and I don't believe my mom intended it this way, but this was how I felt about it. It was, I'm right about this. It was like a perfectionist kind of, and again, my act of rebellion was like, I'm not going to be like you, so I'm not going to make my bed, because, children and parents. But again, we'll deconstruct that a different day. And she just kind of was like, okay, whatever, you're making your bed, I guess that's what counts. And I was like, okay, whatever. And so again, to wrap that, idea up, it's the same message, whatever story you're sitting there thinking about, and you're telling yourself, well, it's already been done. Like the story's already been told, but it hasn't been told in the way that you need to tell it. And, there's so many, even if we look at like Harry Potter, we're on the nerd fantasy train. So if we go Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, they all have a very similar message, but it's how they're told. And, because of how it's told and the characters and the personas that it comes through, different people have different ones as their favorites. There's people that absolutely love Star Wars, but will never watch Harry Potter. And there's people that absolutely love Harry Potter that will never watch Star Wars. And so we need different vehicles for different messages because it's going to attract different people. And so I just want you to take a moment and sit on the concept, going back to, and I'm not going to try to say her name again because I've already embarrassed myself by butchering her name once today. But sitting with the concept is, what is the task that was appointed to you? And she obviously says Frodo of the Shire, but insert your name, that if you do not find a way, no one else will. And I did an episode on this a while back, and I will link it down below because if you haven't listened to it, I do want you to go listen to it as like a prereq to this episode about finding your purpose. But I will touch on this concept again here. It's just more fleshed out in that other episode about finding your purpose. Is in order to find our purpose, we first have to feel purposeful. And so the point of me bringing up this concept today is when we truly feel like there is something out there that if we don't find a way, no one else will, that is going to start giving us a sense of purpose. I have a specific mission. I am an important part of the divine plan, because if I don't fulfill this mission, nobody else will. And I want you to really start feeling some purpose in that. And as you start to believe these things, and as you start to feel this way, your purpose is naturally going to find you. And the last concept that I really wanted to touch on today is really working on getting everyone else's thoughts out of your head so that you can tap back into your own voice. Because one of the things that I caught myself doing over the weekend is I have this idea of, so when I think of my purpose or my mission of, helping people heal, helping people get out of that trauma trance and get back to their authentic selves, when we think about what we are here to do, our brain automatically defaults to how we need to do it. And it will default on what we see in the world. So I'm just going to use myself as an example with the healing and trauma healing space. So when I think of, and I'm just going to make this very broad, but when I think, okay, I'm here to be a healer, I'm here to help people heal, I'm automatically, the images I'm going to see is how my mentors are doing it. So the people I've learned from, or the people that have similar businesses to I want to have. There's a part of my brain that assumes like, oh, I have to do it that way. And for me, I have felt stuck in a lot of ways. And it dawned on me, it's because I'm trying to do it everybody else's way, and I'm not doing it Michaela's way. And that's also why something that we are supposed to do can feel out of alignment and can feel not correct, is because it's not the driver. It's not that we're driving in the wrong direction. It's that the vehicle we're trying to drive is not the vehicle we're meant to drive. And so, and that is what, for me, because when I said that this was the conversation, whenever I really need to just flush out something, or I'm struggling with something, like I'm in an internal conflict with something, I go on a drive. Like going on a drive just clears my head. It allows me to, when I talk about like what I was encouraging you to do of quieting everybody else's voices, driving and the shower, those are two places I can really quiet everybody else's voices and really tap into my own voice. And so I went on a drive, and, when I think about, because I think we're all here to be creators. I believe we're all here to be creators. And in being a creator, it's a dance with the divine, with God, with source, with the universe, whatever you call the force. Of course, we're going to tie this back into Star Wars. Whatever you call that universal energy, that universal, again, source that's greater than us, where, and maybe you're listening to this and you're an atheist, but I just want you to think of that thing that's bigger than us, even if it's nature, right? Like, even if you are an atheist, there is this concept of, there is something, this fabric underneath it all that's making things happen, right? Like a tree doesn't have to think to grow, it just grows. And so what is that thing that is making sure the tree grows, even if the tree is not thinking about growing? So even if you're an atheist, just think of that universal life force that is just something that we can't quite conceive of, right? So again, for you, it might be nature. I'm going to say God or source. And so when I think about us being the creators of our lives, I do think about it being a dance with source, a dance with the divine. And in that, that's, a co-creation, a co what is my mission? What is my duty that I came here to fulfill, that if I don't figure this out, nobody else will? And then how do I do it in Michaela's way? Because that's the dance. That's the, I always think of that song, the John Michael Montgomery, life's a dance you learn as you go. And when I say the word, like, as my mentors would say, like healers or spiritual guides and, stuff like that. And when I say it that way, I do deeply care about helping people. But when if I fast forward and think about my last day on earth, or I think about the day after I passed, kind of doing my life review and looking back on my life, the thought of being a healer just doesn't click. Like the actual thought that comes to my mind is like, I could give two shits. Like, and because to me, it's so, why I can give two shits about it is it's so invisible to me. Like just talking to people, and it's so invisible. Like there's no evidence of it. And that's not wrong, because there is evidence of it, right? There's someone's transformation, but there's this invisible force. And for me, I have this very deeply spiritual side of me. I am also a very physical. I love being like on earth. I love being out in the grass. I love being in the trees. Like I love, I don't like reading online. I like having tangible books. And so that's why just doing what some of my mentors are doing, I could give two shits about, because to me it's too invisible for me. And I love art. I love like when I think about what would upset my human more, because again, there's that dance, there's the soul part and there's the human part. And when I think about my human specifically and what I love and what I enjoy, because that is a very important part of it too. And I think, if you're someone who's been in the spiritual world, I do think that's been lost a lot in the spiritual. It's like, give your soul over to the divine, surrender it all to God. And what if that is all true, what is the point of us being here and being human? Because if that was the whole sole purpose of it, then we wouldn't have incarnated to be a human. And that is where there is that duality of it. And so when I think about the human part of it, again, if I look at that and was like, all I did was talk to people and help them heal, again, would I find deep purpose in it? Of course, yes, I would. And I don't feel that spark. I'm like, I do feel that part of like, oh, okay. But when I go back to writing books and having a book become like, that's like, oh my gosh, I just like to see a story that this, and then this for me ties back into the divine too. When I think about taking an idea, because I look at ideas very much as, and Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this in Big Magic, I think of ideas as like their own consciousness, very much like I would look at like a spirit baby. They choose what channel they're coming through. They choose their parents. And I believe ideas are the same way. They choose the parents. And so when I think about taking this idea that's in the ether and like channeling it through me, and when we think about the creative process, it is very much like the birthing process. We have a time when we're pregnant. We have a time when we're growing, we're writing the books, we're in the creation process. To me, that's the pregnancy. And then when it's time to push it out into the world, that is the delivery. And then the marketing or the sharing, that is the raising of the child, right? That lights me up way more. And so this conflict that I went on a drive to sort out was, I really do feel like my soul is here to help people heal. But then my human really has this creative and this art part of me. And again, when I think about like being a healer or being an artist, I feel so much more lit up by thinking about being an artist and creating things. And that was what I heard from, again, the divine source God is, and why do you think art doesn't heal? And I was like, oh, because where have I got the majority of my healing from? I have got it from art. And so I had to flip that perspective in my mind that I can't do both, or that art doesn't heal. Because I have, as of right now, that I'm aware of, and there's things that I have not added up, have spent over $30,000. I think I'm closer to 40 grand than I am 30 grand, which for some people is a lot. For some people, there's some people that drop 100 grand on their personal development a year. It's all relative. I say the dollar to say I have put a lot of time and resources into healing, personal development, different healing modalities. And when I think of when I felt the most peace, when I have felt the most whole again, it is when I'm creating and doing art. And I've really been playing with this concept of, is art the only way out? Meaning, is creating art the only way truly out of our pain? Because when we think about pain and purpose, and again, go back to my episode about how to find your purpose to hear me flesh out this whole concept. But when to turn pain into purpose, there has to be a process to do that. There has to be a transmutation. So when we think about, let's just go making apple juice. I've got a juicer next to me. We take an apple. So let's say the apple for this instant is our pain and the juice would be the purpose. We can't just look at the apple and say juice. We can't just say it and it transforms. We have to cut the apple, put it through the juicer, and in the juicing process where the pulp goes out one end of the juicer and the juice comes out the other end of the juicer, that is the transfiguration. That is the transmutation. There is that process. And so with pain, turning pain into purpose, there has to be a juicing process. There has to be a process that we go through to take our painful emotions and turn them into positive emotions. There has to be that transmutation process. And for me, I haven't found any better way to do it than through art. And it can be art in the form of dancing. It can be art in the form of writing and singing, whatever that is, creating. But I keep coming back to all these random things that I've tried. And I'm like, I keep going back, is art the only way out of this pain and into purpose? And so it's just wild that I'm sitting here the last couple of weeks arguing with myself about like, how do I be an artist and a healer? But they're actually one and the same. And so and this is the last thing, talking about like clearing other people's voices out of your head. What have you been arguing with yourself about that's actually, as I was doing, is one and the same? You're trying to be two different things, but they can actually merge. They can actually be one. You don't have to be 10 different people. You can just be yourself. And in being yourself, you encompass and you embody all of those 10 different things, all of those 10 different concepts. And our culture has got so obsessed, too obsessed with identities. The only identity you are here to embody is your authentic self. And that authentic self, it might be a writer, it might be an artist, it might be a healer, it might be a mom, it might be a dad. But at the end of the day, it's just you. And that is the greatest gift that you can give to the world. So that is the last thing I'm going to leave you with today. And we covered multiple different concepts, but if it's only one question that you can ask yourself to take this away, is how can you be more you today? Thank you for listening to this episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, again here with Tank and Willie the Corgi. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so honored if you could leave a review and let me know what you enjoyed most about the show. Leaving a review is just really the best way to thank me for this episode and a sign and a signal of what you want to hear more about. It helps get the show out to other people. And so I would be so honored if you could take a moment and give me that thank you. Either way, I am so grateful that you're here and you listen to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast.